I'm Iris Muller. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor and the proud mom of 2 children, one of whom has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and is nonverbal.
And I'm Alma Schneider, a licensed clinical social worker and the proud mom of 4 children, one of whom has Prader-Willi syndrome.
In this podcast, we discuss the uncensored truth about raising kids with disabilities.
Prepare to laugh, cry, and hopefully learn something new. This is Two Moms, No Fluff.
Hello, everybody. We are Alma Schneider and Iris Muller, which is me and Alma on the other screen. Happy to invite you to join us today for another episode of Two Moms, No Fluff, where we discuss the honest truth about raising our kids with disabilities and how does that feel like. And today's topic is...
Hello, everyone. Today's topic is changing or adapting our home to accommodate our child with disabilities and all that entails. And as many of our episodes go, this is just the first in this topic because there's so much to say that we don't want to have you on our podcast for 5 hours. So eventually we'll have speakers on the topic. We will have, different products, that we'll talk about that have been really useful. But for today, we're going to do an overall general discussion of not only the items that we've had to buy or the little tricks that we use to make our house accommodating, but also how it feels, because we always want to have an emotional component to this because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about. There's a lot about the practical things that we have to do, but what it feels like to have to do this and what it feels like when other people come over and see this. So let's just get started. I think we both have quite a bit to say about this topic. Iris, you have a child who uses a wheelchair, and I have a child who cannot get into the kitchen or the food. So who should start? Who should start today? We don't want to make this a competition about who has to do more in their house.
I don't know if it's a competition, but I think that everyone who has a child with a disability, whether it's a sensory sensitivity or epilepsy or whatever you want to name it, they need to accommodate something and change some of the things in their home.
Yes.
And as they say, home is where the heart is, and also tons of other durable medical equipment. And, I guess a guest that we didn't think that we are going to host on a daily basis, like tons of aides, therapists, and other services, social workers that do their occasional visit here. I think that one of the things that I definitely put at the top 5 of the list of losses with the change to having a child with disability is privacy, and the sense that my home is my sanctuary, because now it feels like the world has invaded and there is not usually I think in a house it's where you kind of like allow yourself to be yourself and you can kind of go crazy. I don't know if people still walk naked in their homes these days or not, but definitely in our house where there's like lots of people, you have to just behave all the time. And that's quite a challenge. Alma, do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to commiserate with what you just said. When Lincoln was first born, I had 2 other kids at the time, and we were fortunate enough to be able to get an au pair to help that we hadn't expected. We hadn't anticipated getting an au pair, but because I really felt strongly about pumping, so that Lincoln would get breast milk, even though he couldn't suck because of his syndrome, I was very intent on having him get breast milk. So he also was fed through a tube that I've mentioned in other episodes. He had a G tube in his stomach and I pumped. So between the feeding and the pumping of the milk, that took me away from my other kids where I couldn't run around the house. So I too had a privacy issue. We did get an au pair because it was a lot less expensive than having a full-time nanny. But the downside and upside is that there's a lack of privacy because she lived with us, and as much as we loved her and she was great, it's having another person in your home at all times. I found myself whispering all the time because you just want to be as private as you can, and that's tough, and I didn't realize how much that took out of me until we were over those years where we had to have an au pair. So yes, the privacy for us was short-lived. I know for you it's ongoing, and that's it's a different way of life. Again, I will call it an alternative lifestyle, but that's one thing. So yes, not walking around naked, not expressing yourself as much as you would like, and which might be a good thing if you're not able to yell or scream as much as you would like. But that, it takes its toll because, as you said, your house is sort of your refuge, and to not feel that way all the time is hard. It's hard. So, moving forward, we had to do a lot of things in our house as our son got older, because if you know anything about Prader-Willi syndrome, it is a syndrome where the individual does not ever feel full. It's an issue with the hypothalamus in the brain, and people who have this syndrome are always hungry and never feel full. That means that everything needs to be locked up at all times, the food, because unfortunately, people who have this can eat to a point where it's a life or death situation, where if a door is left open, or if they are allowed to enter cabinets or the refrigerator and nobody's around, they could literally have a stomach rupture that can result in death. So it's a very, very serious issue. And we have dealt with it in a variety of ways, but we've had to change the nature of our home. Fortunately, we live in a home that has two doors to the kitchen. So initially, we simply locked the refrigerator. We put a lock on the refrigerator and a lock on the cabinets. So I'm saying that in a very cavalier way, like, oh, we just put a lock on the fridge and a lock on the cabinets. Now I'm going to put on the emotional hat. Having to do that, it was, for me, very disturbing, but at the same time, a huge relief, because I knew that he would be safe if we had everything locked up. But it felt like you were, number one, living in a prison, and number two, in many ways. And it was very hard on my kids as they got older, because it was embarrassing to them. Like, their friends would come over and they'd be like, why do you have locks on your cabinet? Why do you have, a lock on your garbage, drawer? Why do you have a lock on your door to the kitchen? And, until the kids got older, they were fine with it later. But when they were younger, it was very embarrassing to them, and they didn't want to be in the home. So, these are things that we can't change. This is our life, and we really needed to keep Lincoln safe, and we still do. So, we originally had the locks on the refrigerator and the cabinets. He got old enough to figure out how to open those, because they were kid locks, and we've had a variety of locks on the fridge. However, a lot of times the other kids will leave the fridge open or leave the cabinets open, and it just didn't work. So eventually we had to put locks on the kitchen doors, and with a keypad where he doesn't know the code. And again, that's not foolproof. Sometimes the door's left open by accident, but for the most part, it does work. But it's very hard on the other kids. But every single time we enter or leave the kitchen, we have to lock those doors so he can't, sneak in, even if we go upstairs for 2 minutes. The nature of the syndrome is such that people tend to act very quickly, like a ninja, sometimes we say. He is a ninja, and, he can't help it. It's part of the syndrome. He just, it's a drive to get food. Their brains are sort of saying, you're starving, you will do anything to get food. So that's one of the things we've had to do.
Yeah, this is Alma, you're touching on the kind of safety piece big time here, because obviously many kids with many other disabilities also have issues relating to their own safety in the house that require a lot of modifications sometimes. And obviously yours is around food, but children with autism that have maybe the nature of escaping that require locks and safety mechanism like alarms and chimes on the doors and all of those little tricks, so parents know exactly where the child is. and also, of course, children that have like maybe explosive behaviors, and you need to protect items in the house and protect your child from breaking items in the house and the aftermath of like getting injured because of that. So obviously safety is a big piece. The sensory stuff with regards to how one organizes their house to be sensory friendly, whether their child has a sensory sensitivity and they need as little stimulus as possible, or if they have a child that is looking for sensory stimulation, that's like a totally different house that you need to arrange. In our situation, obviously, because my daughter has quadriplegic cerebral palsy and she's using, a wheelchair and a gait trainer and a stander and all of those other pieces of medical equipment, there's a lot of issues that relate to just physical accessibility, in which I'll probably talk about later in depth. But I think the last piece in those maybe 4 walls of I guess disability friendly home is the whole kind of organization, the organization mechanism that needs to kind of work for both the parents and the child with a disability, because you would organize the house differently to accommodate different situations. Just to touch on that a little bit, I know that for us, because our daughter was or still is nonverbal, but before she even had her communication device, her way to communicate about items in her environment and beyond that was by gazing with her eyes towards the items that she wanted. And it was very easy, if she would gaze on a certain bin, to go through the items in the bin. But if something was not in the bin and she wanted it, we were stuck. So
like a toy bin? You're talking about like a toy bin?
A toy bin, or just like let's say a bin with her creams or like her hair ties, whatever it is. And you would present the items in the bin to her and something is missing. It's very hard without a communication device to explain which item it is specifically, especially let's say it's a figurine box and now she's sometimes at loss for words with the limited communication that she had back then when she was younger. So organizing things is a big deal for some families, and we'll get into those little categories later on, but I'll let you expand on your experience with that as well.
Yeah, well, talking about where the child spends most of the time, I think you're reminding me that we live in a house and there are different rooms, and we made a point of having his room close to ours so that we could hear if he did get up in the middle of the night and go downstairs and do something he, maybe shouldn't be doing. So that's another privacy issue. He was right, next to us for many years. Talking about kids who elope, who, leave the house. We did have to eventually get a Ring doorbell so that we could have a video and a little alarm in different places in the house to let us know if, for example, he was going down the stairs or if he was leaving the front door or coming in the back door. And I want to state that these are all things that cost a lot of money, that what we're talking about, what I'm talking about at least at this point, this is cold hard cash. It costs a lot of money to put the Ring doorbell. It costs money to put these digital locks on the door. However, I found out that you can put those locks on the door yourself. We had no idea that we could do this ourselves, and we actually did need it immediately because from one day to the next we realized he was going into the kitchen. So we really did have to get it done immediately. And take it from me, if you have a child, because it's not just Prader-Willi syndrome where kids overeat and get into the fridge and, take all the stuff out. There are many issues that kids have. A lot of kids with autism have what is called hyperphagia, where they want to eat all the time and or just go into the fridge and make a mess. There are ways to get these things fun. You can do it yourself for some of these kinds of locks, but if your state sometimes will pay for items that are related to the disability that help keep the child safe. So it's always important to inquire. In New Jersey, it's called Perform Care. and once they turn 18, it's called the 21. It's the Division of Developmental Disability. But it's really important, if the money is an issue, to find out if it will be covered by the state or by your insurance, because these are real safety issues. I mean, if a kid leaves the house, that's dangerous. So having an alarm is something that we've had to do. And I love what Iris said about bells and, the doors. Unfortunately, we're able to control a lot of this stuff in our own homes. But if we go to someone else's house once in a while, if there's a vacation, or if we're going to a friend's house, their house is not equipped for our children, and there might be a way to rig it so it's doable and safe for our children, other people's homes. But one easy thing that I have done is my friends have put a bell on their door. If he tried to leave our bedroom, recently I stayed at Iris's house. We went out for a visit, and she was kind enough to put a chain lock on the door with a key. And at the end of the trip, I ended up using that, and it worked. But I was so nervous that he would break the chain that I would physically move the bed every night that I was sleeping in front of the door. And that's when I found out that my son goes to the bathroom once or twice a night. So in the middle of the night, I had to move the bed again and follow him up the stairs to the bathroom, and then move it back when I got in, and then do it again a couple hours later when he got up. So just to let you all know what we parents go through, to just have a little vacation trip. We're Hercules in the middle of the night moving a bed. But these things can be done. I'm saying it with humor, but it is, there is a way around a lot of this stuff. Again, if I had read the website about his syndrome, I would have thought I could never go anywhere. There's no way that I could ever stay at anyone else's house. But if there is a will, there is a way. So please know, I hope that you'll leave this podcast episode today knowing that there's a way to do this. And, maybe not 100%, but there will be tips and tricks that you will learn along the way if you haven't already. And we hope you'll share those tips with us in the comments, how to keep your house safe and how to be safe once you leave your home and go on vacation or stay at a friend's house.
Yeah, I'm listening to you, Alma, and I think to myself about my daughter and about probably many other families with a child in this situation, that as she grew older, the amount of times that we are able to visit other people's homes is close to zero, because it's very hard to find a home that is accessible enough, let's say, that we can bring our own ramp to maybe bypass a couple of stairs on the way there and bring her in. But at almost 14, she doesn't want to be lifted out of her wheelchair to be carried upstairs, and she wants to stay in her chair for a good reason. And it makes a social life or visiting other people extremely tricky. So when it comes to our own homes, I think that it's a good thing to remember that some families, in lack of any other possibility, do tend to host a lot. And I want to acknowledge a friend of mine from Calgary, Alberta, who said, I can't host ever in my own home because of my child's behavior and how our house looks like now that I have this child. So I know that some people have that as a challenge as well. They can't go easily to visit other people without, finding the right support for their child with a disability. And they can't host because of the situation in their own home. So for all of those families out there struggling one way or another with the redefinition of their house as a home, and struggling with accommodating their child and somehow still feeling like their house is their house, we hear you. We're there too in so many different levels. And my thing is that the stages in a child's life also define the different levels of intervention or accommodation that is needed. I can definitely say that for kids like Karen, my daughter, who as they grow, the equipment grows with them. It's kind of always hard to even understand what would the needs look like in the future. And I feel that right now, as we're finally, we reached a point in time that we have to kind of design a wheelchair accessible home for her. And I know that I can probably predict very well the next 5 years. Can I predict 10 years from now or 20? That's a challenge. And I want to touch on something you said, Alma, about the locks. And one fine day, understanding that you can no longer kind of protect him without putting those locks all over the kitchen doors and the cabinets. For us, we had these moments of realizations a couple of times when it was a moment too late, i.e. like that you cannot carry your child to the bathroom anymore. Like one fine day, this cannot work anymore. Or at the beginning of this year, we had a tornado alarm and we needed to run downstairs with our kids, and my daughter had to be carried downstairs, and we didn't quite know. It's an old house, the stairs are very steep, who would do that and how. My husband carried her downstairs and had a week long of a backache later on, and it was like dangerous and scary.
Yeah.
So we are like, we cannot stay in this house. This is not safe. And with the bathroom situation, we understood that we need to have a ceiling lift because we can no longer lift her. Now, from the moment you reach the conclusion that you actually need to apply for the equipment and get it funded and then get it purchased and then get it installed, there is probably a gap of a year. How do you take your child to the bathroom during that 1 year? This is a year of misery, unless you're a smart person, smarter than me for sure, and think about those things ahead of the game. So in this episode, I want to encourage parents to try to be proactive, and in that sense to I guess read, learn, and talk to other parents and try to predict your child's needs, because it's very hard to try to guess when things would happen to your own child. But you can survey other parents around and try to make a calculated guess. And if you can save yourself the agony of just being so desperate, waiting for a piece of equipment while you have a daily struggle of carrying your child to the bathroom 8 times a day, then I think you'll increase your quality of life a bit.
Yes. And this, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because this brings up a lot of the issues that we discussed in our episode about finding your people in your community. Because who are you going to ask? What's going to come next? What products are good for us to have in the house? It's going to be people who are in a similar situation. So for us, we were on Facebook pages, learning from other people who had older kids, what kind of locks they used, what the easiest thing to do was. And we didn't have, we had to do trial and error with a bunch of locks, but the trial and error came with the items that people had recommended to us that ended up being the best for us. And, I want to go back to the issue of going to other people's homes that can accommodate us. There's nothing more that's more of a relief than, for me, going to the house of a family that has a child with Prader-Willi syndrome, for them to stay over or to just hang out there, because I know it's going to be safe. And I'm wondering for you, Iris, if there are people, saying that there are pretty much zero places where you can go to accommodate her. People who have children who use wheelchairs would be, and maybe you don't have those at the moment, but that is another example of, if you meet people and you have, this in common and you end up socializing and like them, that's a great place to visit, because they will be able to have the space and the house arranged in such a way that Karen could get around in the wheelchair, or anyone else who's, in that situation.
Yeah, I think that in general, when it comes to homes, it's amazing that when people do kind of invite us over and they try to kind of rearrange and like in your case, you had a delegation of 4 people running to, accompany us from the moment we parked to actually like dragging the wheelchair up the stairs that we can like go in. If it's just me and my daughter alone, no can do. But
you need more people.
It's always also when you go to visit, it's a lot to do with the other family and how able and willing they are to help make it possible for you to come over.
And that's another emotional piece that I just want to point out. That's hard, I imagine, to put people in that position because, they're going to have to physically help us. They're going to have everything right, or else we're going to have to leave. And that causes a lot of stress. We don't want to put people out.
Obviously, there's a lot to be said about like visiting other people's homes. But the thing is, when it comes to our own home, I think that there's a big emphasis all the time about how to make the home accessible to your child, and very little thought and emphasis about the rest of the family and what happens to them as a result of the changes in their lifestyle with the child with the disability. So I want to ask our listeners to kind of focus and concentrate first of what a home means to them and what are their priorities, and start there, because it is very, very easy. I've been there to get lost in this like spiral of getting equipment, getting aids, getting services into the house and all that. And then one fine day, just to find yourself lost in your own home. That being said, Alma, I know that you've seen us in our New Jersey apartment, and this was a situation that was in some way more restrictive in others, even though it was a smaller kind of living arrangement. It had more freedom, but at the end of the day, knowing your priorities, I said it again, never mind. Knowing your priorities helps design or think about everything else in your child's life. I think that we put a lot of effort at the beginning in versifying the positioning options for Karen. That means that we didn't want her to be in the same chair, in the same position for extended periods of times. So we purchased a bunch of different sitting mechanisms and systems for her, including Firefly, Go2Sit, which is one of my favorites. But in addition to that, we had the power wheelchair, we had the manual wheelchair, we had another seat that she could kind of like sit in the living room, the Go2Sit, a beanbag, etc. That was great. We decided that each activity would be taking place in another chair, or some of the activities were actually on a stander, etc. And then we versified how many positions she kind of is assuming in a day.
Yeah, so she has that variety.
She has that variety.
Yeah.
Did other people had the freedom to walk freely in our small living room? Was it easy to move from one room to another? No. In retrospect, would I do the same? No. Like I had to also consider other people and what the house would look like, and how easy or hard would it be for everybody else to kind of maneuver about. We had to say goodbye to a really nice, huge beanbag that we got as a gift for one of her birthdays, because it took half a room, and New Jersey apartment rooms are small. We could not keep it. It was beautiful and maybe fun, but the amount of fun was not worth it. So my point again, think of yourself first, what is important, and then redefine how you make priorities for your child. Because if you're kind of hating your own life circumstances, then there is a dramatic decrease in your own level of happiness and quality of life.
Yes, absolutely. And some things are negotiable, some things aren't. And you're making me think of something that kind of cracks me up, because when we put in the Ring doorbell, it's a video that you see, if the person's at the door, and we had to put one in the back door because there's an entrance to the kitchen from the back door. And without mentioning names in my family, some of my families were very upset about that video camera documenting what time, for example, people were coming in at night, sneaking in through the back door, and maybe seeing some of the activities that were going on in the back, in the backyard area that were seen on the video. So that was a sibling issue that, we had a sibling episode already that we've recorded. But sometimes it's a perk to have a child who's in need of certain accommodations, because then you see what's going on behind the scenes with your other kids that maybe shouldn't be happening. But they were, we had many discussions. It's not negotiable, because they were not happy that there was documentation of things that they maybe didn't want documented, but we had to do it for safety. So some things negotiable, some things not. And the main goal is safety, but there are a lot of ways that we could be creative to not have people feel like all of their privacy is, gone. Or, for example, with my other kids, again, I have 4 kids and one of them has Prader-Willi syndrome. We have situations where the kids will eat in the basement, and we can lock that door so that he is not present and he does not see what's going on, and he doesn't have to feel tempted and left out, because that's what the other kids, need that freedom to be able to have their friends over and eat cheese doodles, things like that a typical kid is going to want to do. There's a way to work, at least in our house, and I'm sure in many of your homes, a way to be, it's just about thinking out of the box and being creative to make it, like you're saying, like creating different spaces for Karen so that she can feel like she's going into different rooms to do different things, as opposed to always being, in one chair. So a lot of, this situation for many of us really does force us to think out of the box and to learn from other people. We could see what other people who have similar situations are doing. And that's where I get a lot of my ideas, simply talking to people who I've met along the way.
Yeah, I think that also in our house, just to revisit the camera situation, at this point in the game, we have cameras all around the house. There's only one guest bathroom that does not include a camera. This is the level that, with regards to like wheelchair accessibility, it's all those features that people always take for granted, like making doorways wide, they're having ramps or zero, how is it called, zero grade entries, so you can kind of easily access the house from outside, etc. But there are other things that are more, I guess, in line with sensory sensitivities or sensory impairments that people need to focus on as they're thinking of their living environment. And even something as simple as changing like fluorescent lightings can be a big difference for someone who has epilepsy, for example. So as we are considering our living space, we need to think about all of those elements, like the lighting, what do we choose in terms of the brightness of lights in our house, and the lighting fixtures or levels that we want to have in our living room or other rooms. We need to think about colors in general. If your child has a visual impairment, choosing the colors of different rooms, even the floors can be put in a way that there is a pattern and it's easier for the child to find themselves in the space. And all of that can be done in a really nice way. But again, it's a matter of thought and planning. There is a big element for noise level. And depending on the child's sensitivity, it means that sometimes you would need to maybe even change hardwood flooring to carpets, so there is a little bit less noise. In our situation, for example, carpet is a no-go because it's so hard to maneuver with a wheelchair or a gait trainer. So that's another take on that thing.
But putting carpeting, making sure, and this goes for most children, but putting carpeting on the steps, if you have a child who, maybe has a lot of energy and is always running, it's very easy to slide on down the steps if you don't have some kind of, carpet there. But even the opposite is important. sometimes you want a creaky house so you can hear when kids are sneaking around. So there's, it's very individual. It's very individual, and it's important to think about all these things. One of the things that I'd like to add is the actual space where you're living. You had mentioned living in an apartment, a small apartment, and that was really difficult. Moving to a place that's affordable, that has much bigger a much bigger house or apartment for less money in a different state, perhaps. I mean, it might have to go to that point where you're actually thinking, we need to move to a
That
place where there's
reminds
more
me
room.
of someone who left New Jersey and moved
It does
all the
remind me. I
way
didn't want
to
to.
Midland,
I
Michigan.
didn't want to say mention any names. I didn't want to out you, but sometimes people have to move to another state, and it worked out great for you. It might be a real compromise for other people, to have to move away from friends or family or the community. But if it means being in your home and being comfortable in your home, that's going to be a compromise that we might have to make.
Yeah, I think that in that case, you also need to remember how we framed this whole move. And this is the mother of all positive thinking ever, right?
How did we frame the move?
How did we frame the move? As a great success, a big upgrade.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we were looking at all of the positivities that we could find in Midland, Michigan that we didn't have in New York City. We were like literally living half an hour from Penn Station. We only had to cross the street and go on a train from Bloomfield, New Jersey to Penn Station, 30 minutes. Now add to that we were living across the street from a train station that wasn't wheelchair accessible.
Oh, that's right. All those steps, all the steps.
Yes. So this was the
No
irony of
elevator.
our life. My husband
That's
would
right.
go to the Natural History Museum with my son on a Saturday because my son really wanted to go on a train. And then he would go the following day with my daughter. Now, if he wanted to go to the city with my daughter, Alma, to the Natural History Museum, we had to take the car, drive to Montclair, go on the train from Montclair to Penn Station, take a subway, and then walk for 10 blocks because that was the closest subway station that was wheelchair accessible to the museum. So going with my daughter to the city wasn't fun, even when we were living there. So when we moved to Midland, Michigan, we said we are only going to focus on the bright side of this move. And we've been doing so, and it's been working fabulously.
Yeah, you never know.
So
When one
sometimes,
door
yes.
closes, another opens.
Yeah. And that being said, I think that the trick to all of this is to try and think in advance about, maybe in this case, I want to say it like that, worst case scenario. Like, what would be the worst case scenario? Your child is now a toddler, but if such and such behavior continues, then probably from this day onward, when you frame pictures in your house, you need to use perspex and not glass. Do you see what I'm saying? Because someone might break your pictures in the future.
Okay.
If your child has a brain injury or another disability that implies that there might be a mobility challenge, do not move to places, whether it's an apartment or a home, that is not, I guess, on one level or with an elevator or wheelchair accessible in one way or another. Try to protect yourself by planning for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And then all that can happen is that you can be pleasantly surprised.
That's right.
In general, when we talk about accessibility, if you plan for something that to be accessible, it makes everybody's life easier regardless. So plan for accessibility, enjoy the benefits of it. And then worst case scenario, you will never need it. And that would be
right.
lovely.
That's right.
Anything else to add,
Beautiful.
Alma?
Just keep things high up so your kids can't get them, just like you would with a typical kid. Somebody was just talking on one of the forums for Prader-Willi syndrome that their child keeps going into the bathroom and the kitchen and opening every shampoo bottle, soap, and just dumping it out. And a lot of kids do this, and they do it as they get older if they have certain challenges. And, these are the kind of things you You just figure out different ways, locked up in a cabinet, because nobody wants to waste the money or have this waste the time cleaning it up constantly. Put things out of reach, lock them up. With a simple, a lock that can be very easy for you to open. Just, even the smallest things can make a difference in your level of stress, to de-stress. So just take advantage of all those things. And again, the number one thing is safety, but we want to make our houses as comfortable as possible. And there are inexpensive ways to do that, more expensive ways, but we can try to get things paid for by the state, by the organization themselves, even reaching out to companies and saying, I have this particular situation, I can't afford it. Would you do a pro bono installation or something like that? All people can say is no. And also GoFundMe pages. Sometimes people do GoFundMe pages for getting help with those kinds of things. And so just, again, always think out of the box. Having a child with a disability can allow us to really expand how we think about things to be as happy as and safe as we possibly can.
And today, at the end of this episode, I want to add to our shout out that we usually have, that we ask people to share their kind of living arrangement and their ideas of how to better your home, so it feels not like a house but like a real home. What did you do for your child and for your family? And this time I'm adding to the request, if you don't mind, share pictures so we can actually see what you guys have done and learn from it, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And because we don't disclose anything about children by sending pictures like that, we'll be delighted. And Alma, thank you again for your companionship here. And
Thank
you.
See
you next time.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For more information, please go to www.twomomsnofluff.com. Thank you.
If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give it a 5-star rating so more people can view it. Thank you.